Reginald, thank you
How you
for
doing?
joining us on the show. How are you?
I'm doing great.
That's good. That's good. Where are you calling from today?
From here from Detroit, Michigan.
All right, all right. I have not been out to Detroit, but I've wanted to go, especially those very attractive housing prices over there.
Yeah, those can get you in trouble sometimes too.
That's what you were saying right before the show. I definitely want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
So to get us started, just tell the listeners and everybody watching who you are, where you're from, and kind of how you got into real estate in the first place.
Okay. I'm Reginald Perryman. I am an associate broker here in the Detroit area at Keller Williams Metro. I've been in real estate for 28 years now. I originally started out at Century 21. I worked there for 10 years. And then I had my own brokerage, actually, which was Rich Realty. I had that company for 13 years and then eventually went over to KW Metro. But during the time at Rich Realty, I want to say maybe the last 5 years, I was an REO broker. And I listed a lot of properties. I think we were averaging anywhere between 400 and 600 homes a year.
Wow.
And I mean, we were cranking them out. That market, when everybody was complaining about the market, we were doing pretty good. So those were some of my best years. And during that time, that's when I really realized that in real estate, there's always a good market for somebody, because that was the first time in my career I seen real money come into the market. And when I say real money, these were people that had large sums of cash that were waiting for a downturn.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it was great. And, I was able to buy quite a few properties, and we'll discuss it later, some of my strategies. But one of the downsides of being a listing broker, primarily for like Bank of America or HUD, was they eventually came out with requirements that we could not buy our own listings, which was fine. But eventually they said if you were a HUD broker, you couldn't buy any HUD home. If you were a Bank of America listing broker, you couldn't buy any Bank of America.
Wow, I did not know that. That is
Yeah.
huh.
And it was, yeah, so, I mean, but there was still other opportunities out there in the market. But yeah, so that was the only downside, but we did good during that time.
Yeah, definitely. And this was right after 2008 crash.
Yeah, well, it was more or less, we started, so actually got into REO prior to that. I started REO right about 2003, 2004. There was just small inventory. There was some independent companies here. So you may have like, the bank may give you, 4 or 5 listings a year. But around 2008, 2009, you would get, 10 listings a month from one bank. And
Wow.
at one point in time with HUD, we were getting as many as 20 listings a week on
Jeez.
average. So yeah, the prices were lower, but we just sold a lot more properties.
That is really crazy. So kind of taking it back real quick, you said you've been in real estate for a long time, over 20 years. So when you first started, how did you get into it? Like what kind of brought you into real estate?
Yeah, so when I got into it, I was 19. My grandmother was an investor. And while she was alive, she would always say, you should go into real estate. And when I graduated high school, she passed away. And she had like 3 or 4 properties that she left to my mother and my uncle, and she left me 2 properties. And but I had to handle the probate estate. And this was before I was licensed.
Wow.
And going through that process, I was like, yeah, I should go into real estate, like she said. I wanted to be a music engineer. I was into music and rapping and everything like that, but and just working odd jobs. And then finally I said, let me go and get my real estate license and see what it's about.
I wish I had somebody like that when I was 19 years old. It pushed me into real estate. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you said you're you got into REO when you had your own brokerage. Now you're at Keller Williams. So kind of tell us, Keller Williams, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you do in your own real estate investing? What do you focus on? And kind of describe your business model. Both go into REO, kind of describe how that works for people who aren't familiar.
Okay.
And, you know, kind of what you're doing right now. Are you doing buy and holds? Are you doing, you know, multifamily, whatever that is?
Right. So overall, I'm in real estate completely. So I'm just looking for great opportunities, whether it's
Yep.
buy and hold, fix and flip.
And do you
Personally,
care if
I
it's
don't.
commercial or residential, or are you just
Yeah,
agnostic?
mostly residential. I've only owned one commercial property, and that was the property that we were originally opened up my brokerage in. We were renovating that property, but then we sold it and then went and leased some space. It just made better sense for us financially at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just looking for opportunities. So some properties make sense to buy and hold. Some are good for fix and flips. Personally, I don't do a fix and flip if I'm going to net under 25,000 because it's not worth the time and energy and effort. I wholesale a little bit as well. A lot of people are
You wholesale
confused.
as a broker.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. I've never heard that happen. That's really interesting.
Well, here's what I tell people. At the end of the day, because people have all of these, they try to make, when you're on social media, they make wholesaling seem sexy, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm from, I started in 92, and I don't know if you remember, you see the late night commercials with Carlton Sheets, and he's selling you these VHS tapes and audio tapes, cassette tapes, actually. So wholesaling is not new. It's legal. Now, different states have, like in Michigan, if you transact more than 6 real estate transactions, you are required to be licensed. Most people don't follow that. But overall, at the end of the day, wholesaling and being an agent, being a broker, all it is, you have a buyer, you have an end buyer, and you have a seller, and someone's getting paid in the middle. I don't care if it's a commission, assignment fee, consulting fee. So when we give these titles, wholesaler and all of this stuff, it's nothing different, right? Now, the way you go about structuring that deal may be different and what you're disclosing. So as a broker and being honest and fair with my clients, every listing appointment I go on is a potential opportunity for me to invest as well. So technically, I'm the first potential buyer for every listing appointment.
I like that.
I always disclose to the seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's what the market value of your home is. Here's what the market value is as is, and here's what I'm willing to pay for the home today as is with no fees, right?
Gotcha.
If it's a situation where I'm going to buy that property and I may know a potential investor that's willing to pay, an extra $10,000 for it because the numbers make sense for them, but it's not a good flip for me, then I can structure it like a wholesale deal, or I can just simply structure it. And there's no limit. People are stuck on this 6% commission. Mm-hmm. There's no rule to say you can't charge 10% or 20%. It's whatever you negotiate. As long as you disclose to the seller what they're getting and how the deal is going to be structured, and they're satisfied with their bottom line, then you're fine. You can structure it instead of an assignment fee to simply say, hey, your house is 80, and you can charge a buyer a $20,000 commission, because as a buyer's agent, you can charge your buyer a commission or a retainer fee. So it's all about disclosure and just explaining it to everybody. Now, some people do get mad. They don't want you to make that much money on a deal, but it's all about how you negotiate everything.
Yep. No, that's good. I've never heard it framed that way, and that it totally makes sense, because really all you're doing is you're just transacting a deal. It doesn't really matter what labels you put on it. You're still bringing a seller and a buyer together, and so it makes complete sense. Yep. So okay, so right now you're buying you're doing buy and holds, you're acting as a broker, and you're also wholesaling. Kind of take me back to REO, kind of how that worked, and just the ins and outs of that business.
Yeah, so REO is unique. One of the things I learned from REO before I got into REO, I absolutely had no systems in place. I didn't track anything. We would just get business in. The only thing I tracked is how much money I was spending, how much money I was making, and if there was a profit, I was happy,
Two
right?
things you need. That's all. The two KPI.
Yeah, but REO made me a better business person overall because, for example, so in REO, as a REO broker, at least at that time, let's use Bank of America, for example. As a listing broker, they give you a property to list maybe 2 or 3 weeks before it goes on the market, sometimes a month or two. You have to do either weekly or bi-weekly inspections, so occupancy inspections to see if the person has vacated the property. Sometimes they ask you to offer the person cash for keys. Depending on who your client is, meaning the bank, they may ask you to front that money. So if they're giving someone $5,000 to relocate, you have to give that person $5,000. You submit for reimbursement,
Wow.
and they're going to pay you within 30 to 45 days. You have to cut the grass bi-weekly and show before and after photos. You have to rekey the property, trash it out. Depending on which bank you're working with, you have to pay all of the vendors, and then they're going to reimburse you. Now, recently, some of the banks like Bank of America, they use like national companies like Safeguard, where they outsource that work to those companies. But typically, you would pay for utilities, you would pay for rekeys, securing the property, lawn maintenance bi-weekly, and you had to do weekly inspections or bi-weekly inspections. So once you get so many properties, then I had 2 field inspectors. So I never seen the properties personally. So I had field inspectors that would go out and take photos. They would take both marketing photos and photos for our BPO, which is our broker price opinion for each property. And then we were required to do broker price opinions monthly. Some systems we had to use were like Equator, which at the time was called REO Trends. It's just a platform that several banks use so that you can upload documents and submit offers. And there was a lot of work for each property. And why I say it made me a better business person, because at first I would just have money, I would just spend it all, have my assistant submit all the reimbursements to the bank. So maybe I had 50,000 out and we received 30,000 in. Wait, there's a problem. So then I realized, wait a minute, I'm loaning the bank free money. Why am I fronting all of this money for the bank? And then some of the commissions on these properties, their minimum commission was $2,000. So if we're selling a $15,000 property, and let's say another agent sells it, so I'm getting 1,000, the other agent's getting 1,000. But I've already fronted 3 or 4 grand on this property, right?
Yeah.
So I'm getting 1,000 back commission, and I'm waiting 30 or 45 days. So you really have to be good with tracking your numbers.
Yep.
And you have to have some money up front in order to be an REO broker. So so eventually, we got a handle of that. That wasn't too bad, because you're kind of forced to use these systems. But then what I started doing was I said, okay, this bank is giving me this type of inventory, and they're slower to reimburse, or they're rejecting some of our reimbursements, and they're only giving me maybe 2 or 3 properties a month. So I start tracking based on which bank. So maybe Bank of America, Chase, this is how much my profit and loss was with Chase, profit and loss with HUD, profit and loss with Bank of America. Then I got smart and said, I don't need all of these clients. I only need the major three, because the rest of them, I'm fronting 3,000 and 4,000 on average per property, and they're holding that money. It's taking them, you know, a month and a half to reimburse me. It doesn't even make sense to have them as a client. So REO can be lucrative, but it has to be, you either have to have a quantity, or you have to have real good assets that they're giving you to list, where you're making, you know, at least a minimum $100,000 and up on the listing price.
Gotcha. And it sounds like you really have to have your processes down for that high volume. I mean, you really have to know, you've got to be nailing every single step in the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, overall, REO was a good run. I have a few banks now, but a lot less inventory. They may give me 1 or 2 a year that I can handle myself. I don't have a field inspector.
Yeah. So for people who are not familiar with REO, how does REO? So REO is basically when somebody defaults and the property goes back to the bank and the bank lists it, correct?
Right. So REO is just the term real estate owned. So the bank forecloses on a property. Here in Michigan, we have a 6-month redemption period. So technically, from the time you miss your first payment, the bank is probably going to wait a minimum of at least 45 days to even start any foreclosure proceedings. Once they foreclose, it goes to court. Then a sheriff's sale date is scheduled, and then the owner has 6 months to redeem the property, either pay it off and redeem it, or they can sell it if there's enough equity. And some banks will still negotiate a short sale during that time period. And what happens, the bank will assign it to you within a redemption period, and they just want you to keep an eye on the property to make sure it hasn't, the occupant hasn't left it vacant. Because if they abandon the property, the bank can file for abandonment and shorten that 6-month time period.
Okay.
But most banks don't do it because there were lawsuits, because someone would say, well, I was in the hospital when you came out and posted the notice, and you guys rekeyed the property and you winterized it, and my diamond ring was missing. You know,
Ooh, yeah.
So
okay.
Most banks started waiting out the 6-month redemption period, and after that, they would have to do an eviction or cash for keys and things of that nature. So,
and REO properties, they all go into short sale when it goes up for listing. Is that correct?
No. So there's a couple of things. So once it goes to sheriff's sale, it's foreclosed on. An individual can attend a sheriff's sale and bid on that property, right? So let's say you owe the bank $150,000, and it goes to sheriff's sale, and there's a bidding process, but the winning bidder can't do anything with the property for 6 months because that owner still has a 6-month redemption period.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. So the owner can still sell the property. But if you're the winning bidder, once that 6 months is up, the bank is not going to get the property back. The winning bidder is going to have ownership of that property, and then they have to evict the occupant or previous owner. Now, in most cases, what happened is the bank will go they will bid at the sheriff's sale to make sure they receive the property back, unless someone bids higher than the balance.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, and typically, right when just before the sheriff's sale, the bank will have a broker do a drive-by BPO. So let's say if it's going to go to sheriff's sale and the bank just wants an idea of market value, so you may say the house is only worth $100,000. The bank may say, okay, once it goes to sheriff's sale, someone may bid 110 or 120. The bank may say, okay, we're just going to let the highest bidder have it, right?
Gotcha.
Back then, not many people were bidding. People were bidding, but they wasn't bidding that high.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different dynamic as to why the banks will let it go or why the banks would keep it and how their books work and everything like that. We won't get into that here, but if you're the listing broker and it goes through and the share sale redemption period is up, then the banks take ownership and possession, and then they list the property with you.
Gotcha.
At that time. Now,
So,
go ahead.
So last note on the REO thing, if somebody were interested in, if an investor was interested in getting into buying REO properties, not as a broker, how would they go about doing that?
So there's a couple sites. A lot of Bank of America inventory is actually on auction.com, but they still list their properties with brokers. If you're looking for HUD homes, you can go on HUDhomestore.com. At least here in our state, those properties are still listed with brokers as well. Most banks are just posting their properties online, but they are still listing most of their properties with brokers as well. So you can just contact any real estate broker and say, hey, in the MLS, there's a specific search you can use that says bank-owned or government-owned properties.
Gotcha.
A few of the smaller banks, they may have like their own platform, so you can just go onto their website and see if they have a REO or bank foreclosures listings on their site. Because you still have like your smart credit unions and things of that nature as well.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'm gonna get us to shift gears here a little bit. We just talked about your business, what you did. Now I want to hear a little bit about your stories. So kind of take us back. You've had a lot of experience over 20 years. What has been the hardest thing that you've experienced so far in real estate? The biggest obstacle that you've kind of had to overcome?
So the biggest obstacle, in all honesty, and I think a lot of investors and brokers can understand this, early on, I just didn't understand taxes. Right? I understood them, but I mean, at 19, coming from working at Wendy's or Myers, and then, all of a sudden you got this, $7,000 tax bill. And I didn't have a lot of mentors around me to say, hey, when you're making these commissions, this is what you need to do with the money and set up separate bank accounts and all this good stuff. Pay estimated taxes. And that wasn't too bad early on, because maybe like my first 3 or 4 years, I didn't make over $30,000 as an agent, right? So that's easy to rebound from. But once I started like flipping properties and things of that nature, me and my partner, we were buying like $30,000 and $40,000 homes and fixing them and flipping them. And like within like 4 months, we made $180,000 profit, and we still had other properties, but we were taking a profit and we used that money to buy a commercial building. And we didn't understand how to structure it as far as tax advantages and things of that nature. So that was my first year owing more than $20,000 in income taxes. And this was in addition to my regular commission income as an agent. So I think that was my biggest challenge over the years. And then, of course, balancing trying to run and grow a brokerage with your family life. So I would say taxes and the balancing act of personal relationships and being successful in business. And eventually you learn ways and you learn and you grow from it. But those were my biggest challenges.
Yeah, I like that. Taxes, I wouldn't have said that. That's a good one. But balancing for sure. I mean, yeah, balancing's a hard one to nail down. That's definitely, it's a learning experience. The longer you live, the more you figure out how to balance.
Right.
Okay, so that's the hardest thing you've experienced. How about what is the aspect of real estate that you absolutely enjoyed the most, gives you the most energy? Take us back to that. What is that?
Actually, right now, I think what I love the most is actually training and coaching other agents.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, especially when if they're like new and they're young, like let's say they're 18 to 25, and this is maybe like their first career. I really just like seeing them, just go out and explode, man, and avoid some of the pitfalls that I had early on. And just helping agents in general. And first time home buyers, I don't really show homes. I have a team, but I still like the process of seeing someone that has, they were renters and their parents were renting homes and they're like second or third generation tenants. And they're just changing that whole dynamic for their family. So I really enjoy seeing that and being a part of that as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So do you have, I mean, out of, the whole 20-year experience, do you have just one single either flip that you did or client that you had, or one deal, one transaction that kind of stands out as your absolute favorite, and kind of like, why was that so good?
Actually, one of my favorite deals just happened in December.
Nice.
It was it was almost like I think over the years, so there's two things. Well, this particular flip was more than just a profit, and it was a good profit. So last year I started really marketing to probate, adding probate leads to my repertoire, because I've always done probate deals with people, but I never really marketed to that niche. And again, I went, met with a seller, and he was like, I told him, I said, as is, this thing is, worth about 135 or so. If you fix it up, we can get you anywhere between like 190 to 200 for it. And he was just like, well, we got several properties. We just let this go. And I said, I'll give you 110 for it today, no fees. I'll pay all the fees. And he said, yeah, I'll take it. and and at the time, I didn't have all the cash for it, and I wasn't about to finance it. I called one of my agents that I know that used to be one of my agents at my brokerage. She came over to KW with me, and she went and started her own team. We partnered up on this deal. We fixed it and flipped it, and we made like a $52,000 profit off the deal. And it closed December 31st of 2019.
Wow.
And I just liked that deal so much because this was someone that was brand new to the business. She started with me as an agent. Now she's a broker, associate broker. She has her own team and she's investing as well. And we were able to partner up and do that deal. So it's like, I don't know what else to compare it to. Maybe, it's like if Mr. Miyagi partnered with Daniel's son and went and kicked butt together.
That's a great comparison. I love it. All right, so changing gears one last time, I want to talk a little bit about what gets you going. So if there's one habit that you do every day that contributes the most to your success as in real estate, what would that habit be?
Prospect. You have to go after the business. I mean, even I'm not the biggest broker in the area or team, but just hitting the phones, man, every day, whether you're cold calling or you're just calling past clients, just talking to people. I mean, you have to talk to at least 30 people a day just to get new business. And investors, and I will say this, wholesalers out hustle real estate agents like 10 to 1. I'm like, dude, how many letters did you send out? And I send out tons of letters and mailers and cold call, but these guys are hustling. So I would say just prospecting, especially for homeowner leads and seller leads. Best thing you can do.
All right. So that kind of goes into our next question. You yourself, you started at 19. If you could go back to that time, your 19-year-old self, and you could tell him one piece of advice, what would that be?
Hit the phones, man.
There you go. I like
the phones. So, like I said, my first few years was, I didn't have any bills. I didn't have any kids and car notes and things of that nature. And I remember one year I was broke. I was gonna rent my house out. I had someone in line to rent my property, and I was gonna move to Atlanta. And when I say broke, I had $80 in my pocket. Huntington Bank And I remember his name, Mr. Khan, was calling me weekly, asking me to catch up on my car note. And this was in November. And, you know, here in Michigan, it gets cold. So you have to have money to pay your gas bill.
For sure.
And it was rough. And I mean, my broker came to me and said, would you like to go to Sweathogs, which was a Floyd Wickman course. They called it Sweathogs at the time. And this was a course, it was a course that lasted from November to February. And it just taught you about getting listings. And I said, of course. So I signed up for it, but I didn't realize it cost $600. I didn't have $600. He paid for the cost of it and said, just reimburse me after your first deal. From November through February, I was the top listing agent for units. I got 17 listings. By March of that following year, I was closing like 4 or 5 deals a month, which was way more than I've done before. And that started me to, you know, that changed my life pretty much at that point. And I remember calling Mr. Khan at Huntington Bank saying, this is my last time speaking to you on the phone.
That's great. So, I love it. So hit the phone.
Yep.
That's a piece of advice. I like it. Yep. All right, so we're at the end here. For everybody listening and watching, if you'd like to share this information, how can people get a hold of you, and what is it you're interested in real estate if somebody were to kind of help you out and give you a mutual benefit there?
So I'm on all social platforms. RegiusRealEstate.com is my website, and you can find me on YouTube. Just look up Reginald Perryman, and Instagram and Facebook, Reginald Perryman, or the Reggie Perryman Realty Group. On Facebook is my business page. I'm on Twitter, Reggie is R.E. That's for Reggie is Real Estate. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, I'm everywhere.
Everywhere.
And just, you know, just wanted to point this out. One of my favorite investing tools, and I've been doing this since the beginning, is seller financing. Here in Michigan, we call them land contracts. So I'm known for doing quite a few of those as well. Perfect opportunity for someone who wants to buy and sell but doesn't want the responsibility of being a landlord. It's helped me out because I'm not paying the same capital gain taxes I would pay on the flip. And I still have some P.O. box money, in other words.
Well, dang, you know, we're at the end of our time, but I wish we could have talked about that. I might have to have you back on at some point.
All right, sounds great.
All right, Reggie, well, thank you for joining us. Just stay on after this, but this is the end, so thank you. And everybody, he's on all platforms, so if you want to get a hold of him, rewind and grab one of those handles.
So, yep.